"Your son doesn't belong at this table." The words hit the room like a glass shattering on marble. Forks stopped mid-air. Someone's champagne glass hesitated halfway to their lips. My son, Ethan, 18 years old, in his cap and gown, still smelling like the graduation stage, just stood there frozen, holding his diploma like it was suddenly too heavy to carry. I didn't move. I didn't scream. I just looked at my cousin Marcus, standing at the head of the table like he owned the room, like he owned all of us, and I smiled, because he had no idea what was in my purse. If you've ever been betrayed by someone you trusted, hit the like button now. If you've ever stayed silent while someone underestimated you, comment here below. And subscribe to Story Retribution, because today's ending proves that karma always arrives, just not when people expect it. My name doesn't matter right now. What matters is that 3 hours before that moment, I was the happiest mother in the world. My son had just graduated top of his class, full scholarship offer in hand, and every relative I loved was gathered at my sister's backyard for the celebration dinner. String lights. A banner that said, "Congratulations, Ethan." The smell of barbecue smoke drifting over folding tables covered in white cloth. I came from a big family, loud, warm, complicated. My parents had 4 children, and I was the quiet one, the one who worked 2 jobs through college while my cousins went to private schools funded by my Uncle Robert's construction company. Robert built that company from nothing, and when he passed 6 years ago, he left it to be run by family, specifically by his son, my cousin Marcus. Marcus was the golden child of our family, tall, loud, always in a tailored suit even at backyard barbecues, always talking about deals and margins and vision. He ran Uncle Robert's company now, Hendricks Construction, and he never let anyone forget it. Every family event became a stage for him to remind us who held the money, who held the power, who mattered. I worked as an accountant. Quiet work. Numbers, spreadsheets, audits. Nobody at these parties ever asked about my job. They asked about Marcus's newest project, his newest car, his newest vacation. I didn't mind. I had my son. I had my small house, paid off through years of discipline. I had peace. That was enough for me. But Marcus never had peace. Marcus needed an audience. The small betrayal happened 4 months earlier, at my mother's birthday dinner. Ethan had just gotten his acceptance letter to the university, and I made the mistake of mentioning it at the table, proud, glowing. Marcus laughed. Not a warm laugh, a performance laugh, loud enough for the whole table to hear. "State University," he said, shaking his head like he'd just heard a joke. "That's cute. My daughter's applying to Ivy League schools. But hey, not everyone can afford real opportunities." Nobody said anything. My mother looked down at her plate. My sister squeezed my hand under the table. I just smiled and changed the subject because that's what I always did. I stayed calm. I never gave him the reaction he wanted. But something in me started keeping score. The bigger betrayal came 2 months later, and this one wasn't about pride. This one was about money. The family's money. I did contract accounting work on the side, and one of my clients was a small supply company that had a business relationship with Hendricks Construction. While reviewing invoices for an unrelated audit, I noticed something strange. Payments from Hendricks Construction going to a shell company. Payments that didn't match any real materials delivered. Numbers that quietly, consistently, drained profit out of the company my Uncle Robert built with his bare hands. Profit that should have gone to the family trust. The trust that was supposed to fund things like, ironically, college for the grandchildren. I dug deeper. Quietly. Carefully. I am an accountant. Digging is what I do. The shell company was registered under an LLC with an address that traced back to a condo Marcus had purchased 8 months earlier. A condo he told the family was a smart real estate investment. It wasn't an investment. It was theft. slow, deliberate theft from his own father's legacy, from a company that employed people my family had known for 20 years, from a trust that was supposed to help kids like my son. I didn't confront him. I didn't tell anyone. I gathered evidence instead. Invoices, wire transfer records, the LLC registration documents, everything laid out in a folder as clean and organized as any audit I'd ever done. I also reached out, carefully, to my Uncle Robert's old attorney, a man named Mr. Delacroix, who had drafted the original trust and still handled the family's legal matters. I told him what I found. He was horrified. He asked me to bring him documentation, and together, quietly, over the following weeks, we built an airtight case. Then came graduation day. I decided not to say anything before the party. I wanted Ethan's day to be about Ethan. I wanted one celebration where Marcus didn't manage to make it about himself. I should have known better. The public humiliation scene happened right after dinner was served. Ethan had gone to grab a plate, still in his cap and gown because everyone kept asking for photos. And as he approached the main table where the adults were seated, Marcus stopped him with a raised hand. "Whoa, whoa," Marcus said, loud enough for the whole yard to hear. "This table's for people who are actually going somewhere in life. Kid, why don't you go sit with the younger cousins?" A few nervous laughs rippled through the crowd. My mother's face went pale. My sister opened her mouth to say something, but Marcus kept going, feeding off the attention. "No offense," he said, smirking, "but state school on a scholarship? That's not exactly something to throw a banner up for. My daughter got into Columbia. That's a graduation worth celebrating." Ethan stood there, 18 years old, diploma in one hand, plate in the other, his face turning red in front of 30 relatives. That was the moment. That was the moment Marcus crossed the one line I never forgave. "Your son doesn't belong at this table," Marcus said, waving him off like he was shooing away a stray dog. I stood up. The silent preparation had already happened weeks earlier, but this was the moment I decided the plan would happen tonight, not later, not quietly in some lawyer's office. Tonight, in front of everyone who had ever watched Marcus talk down to my son and said nothing. "Ethan," I said calmly, "go sit down, sweetheart. I'll bring your plate." Ethan hesitated, humiliated, but he nodded and walked to the far table where the younger cousin sat, his shoulders low in a way that broke something inside me. I turned to Marcus. I didn't raise my voice. "Marcus," I said, "can I speak to you for a moment? In private?" He rolled his eyes, playing to the crowd. "Whatever you need to say, you can say right here. We're all family." That was exactly what I needed him to say. The hidden plan required exactly this. Marcus, in front of everyone, refusing to have a private conversation, refusing to give himself an easy exit. "All right," I said, "if you insist." I reached into my purse and pulled out the folder. Not dramatically, not with shaking hands. Calm, like I was pulling out a napkin. "Since we're all family," I said, "and since you clearly think my son doesn't belong at this table, let's talk about who really belongs here." Marcus's smirk faltered, just slightly. "What is that?" "This," I said, opening the folder and setting the first page on the table in front of him, "is an invoice from Hendricks Construction to a company called Ridgeline Supply Partners. $43,000 for materials that, according to the actual project logs I obtained from your site manager, were never delivered." The yard went quiet. Even the cousins at the kids' table stopped talking. "This," I continued, placing a second page down, "is the LLC registration for Ridgeline Supply Partners, filed 8 months ago, registered agent address." I paused, letting it land. "Your condo on Winslow Avenue." Marcus's face changed color, not red anymore, pale, like all the blood had drained straight out of him. "You've been skimming money out of your father's company," I said, my voice still steady, still calm, "out of the trust that was supposed to help fund college for kids like Ethan. The same trust you just humiliated my son over." "That's..." That's not, Marcus started, but nothing else came out. His mouth opened and closed like he was trying to remember how words worked. Wait, what? My Aunt Carol said from across the table, staring at the papers, then at Marcus, then back at the papers. I pulled out my phone next. I also have a recorded phone call, I said, from 6 weeks ago, where I asked your site manager, off the record, about material deliveries for the Ridgeline invoices. Would you like me to play it? You don't need to, said a voice from the edge of the yard. I turned. It was David, Marcus's own site foreman, who had been invited to the party as a family friend, someone Marcus had brought along more as a status symbol than a guest. David stepped forward, phone in his own hand. I have the text messages, David said quietly, looking directly at Marcus. Where you told me to backdate the delivery logs for Ridgeline, I kept them. I didn't know what to do with them until now. The color that was left in Marcus's face disappeared entirely. David, Marcus started. I've got a family too, Marcus, David said. I'm not going to jail covering for you. I reached one more time into the folder. And this, I said, pulling out the last document, is a letter from Mr. Delacroix, your father's attorney, confirming that these findings have already been reported to the Trust's Oversight Board. He's actually right over there. Every head turned. Mr. Delacroix, who had been sitting quietly near the dessert table the entire evening, dressed simply enough that no one had questioned why a stranger was at a graduation party, stood up and gave a small, solemn nod. Everything she's told you is accurate, he said. I've reviewed the documentation myself. Marcus, we'll need to speak formally, very soon. The public reveal was complete. And Marcus, golden child, tailored suits, endless lectures about vision and opportunity, stood frozen at the head of the table, gripping the back of a chair like it was the only thing keeping him upright. Say something, his own wife said quietly beside him, her voice trembling with a mix of embarrassment and disbelief. He didn't. He couldn't. He just stood there, pale, jaw working uselessly, 30 relatives staring at him in silence. My mother finally spoke, her voice shaking. Robert built that company for this family, for all of us, for the kids. She looked at Marcus like she was seeing him for the first time. How could you? I was going to pay it back, Marcus finally managed, his voice cracking. I had some investments that didn't. Stop, Mr. Delacroix said gently but firmly. Anything you say right now isn't helping you. Aunt Carol, Marcus's own mother, stood up from the table, her hand over her mouth, tears already forming. She looked at me, then at the papers, then at her son. She didn't say anything. She didn't need to. Her silence was its own verdict. I looked over at Ethan, sitting at the kids' table, staring at the scene unfolding with wide eyes. I walked over to him, picked up his plate, and set it back in front of him. Come sit with me, I said gently. He stood, and this time, nobody stopped him. We walked back to the main table together, and I pulled out the chair right across from where Marcus stood frozen. Sit here, sweetheart, I said. This is exactly where you belong. Ethan sat down slowly, still processing everything that had just happened, and for the first time all night, he smiled. Small, uncertain, but real. I didn't gloat. I didn't raise my voice at Marcus again. I didn't need to. The papers had said everything I needed them to say. The emotional resolution came quietly, the way real resolutions usually do, not with fireworks but with people finally seeing clearly. My mother walked over and hugged Ethan first, whispering how proud she was of him, how sorry she was that his day had been overshadowed. My sister came next, then my uncle's old business partner, then cousins who had never said 2 words to me at these gatherings suddenly pulling up chairs beside us, wanting to know more about Ethan's scholarship, his plans, his future. Marcus's wife took their daughter and quietly left the party. David stayed, sitting a few seats down, looking relieved in a way I hadn't expected. Like a weight had finally come off him, too. Marcus sat down eventually, not at the head of the table anymore, but off to the side, alone, staring at nothing, while Mr. Delacroix spoke to him in a low voice about next steps, and the board, and returning what was taken. Nobody comforted him. Nobody defended him. The same family that had laughed along with his jokes for years now looked at him like a stranger. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt tired, the way you feel after carrying something heavy for a very long distance and finally setting it down. I sat with my son for the rest of the evening. We ate barbecue that had gone slightly cold. We talked about his dorm room assignment, his roommate, the classes he was excited about. For the first time all night, nobody interrupted us to talk about Marcus's newest deal or newest car. Later, as the party wound down and people began saying their goodbyes, my mother pulled me aside. "How long did you know?" she asked quietly. "A few months," I said. "Why didn't you say anything sooner?" I thought about that for a moment. "Because I wanted to be sure. And because some things," I said, glancing over at Ethan laughing with his cousins near the dessert table, "deserve to come out on their own terms, not out of anger." The final lesson settled over me slowly, the way truth usually does, not as a lightning bolt, but as a quiet certainty. Marcus had spent years building his image on other people's silence, my mother's silence, David's silence. He mistook our patience for weakness, our quiet dignity for something to walk over. But quiet isn't weak. Quiet is often just someone waiting for the right moment, holding the truth carefully until it's ready to stand on its own. I never raised my voice that night. I never called Marcus names, never listed his cruelties out loud, never made a scene beyond the simple, undeniable weight of facts laid one by one on a table. I didn't need theatrics. The truth did the work I never could have done through anger. As I drove Ethan home that night, his diploma resting carefully on his lap, he turned to me and asked, "Mom, were you scared? Doing that in front of everyone?" I thought about it honestly before I answered. "No," I said. "I was scared before, watching him humiliate you, watching everyone stay quiet, watching you sit at that other table. That scared me. Tonight, I wasn't scared at all. Tonight, I finally stopped being quiet about the right things." Ethan smiled, tired but proud, his diploma catching the streetlights as we drove past. "Best graduation gift ever," he said. I laughed for the first time all day. "I was hoping you'd say that." We drove home in comfortable silence after that, the kind of silence that comes after storms, not before them. And somewhere behind us, at a backyard still littered with folding chairs and half-eaten cake, my cousin Marcus sat alone with the wreckage of a lie he thought would never see daylight. He learned the hard way, what I had known all along. Karma doesn't announce itself. It doesn't arrive with anger or shouting. Sometimes it arrives quietly, in a folder, on a graduation night, carried by the very person you underestimated the most. If this story resonated with you, hit that like button right now. Tell me in the comments, what would you have done in my situation? If you enjoy stories about family betrayal, emotional drama, shocking revenge, and the justice that always finds its way back, subscribe to Story Retribution and turn on the bell so you never miss the next story. Tomorrow's story might be even more unbelievable. See you then.